In the last year, I've heard from more Americans than ever who are looking for a way to escape the United States. Whether they want to expatriate, give up their passport and never look back, whether they want to stay U.S. citizens but live overseas and distance themselves from the chaos and the rising taxes, or whether they want to stay in the U.S. and simply have another set of options, have a backup plan for when things get bad enough for them. More people are realizing that escaping the U.S. isn't as extreme as they once thought. And today, I'm going to give you 2 things to think about before you build your plan. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, and here at Nomad Capitalist, we built a team of over 30 people, spent over a dozen years curating a network of the best global experts, all to help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs legally go where you're treated best. And today, I'm going to share with you my 2 first steps to escape the U.S. Now, we've been very successful, in part, I think, because I don't do doom and gloom. We're not here to talk about fear. We're here to talk about facts. And so, perhaps the word escape is a little aggressive, but I think people understand that they want the ability, if not to leave the country now, they need the ability to do so, because you have politicians who are increasingly calling out wealthy people. They're looking to raise taxes. They've already been reducing freedoms. The U.S. passport is a shell of what it once was in this current climate. And I think people realize that they need options. And so this is not going to be a video where I share the exact passport that an American should get or the best offshore company. We have lots of videos, over 1,000 of them. You can go and watch that. But I want to take one step back, because one thing I've learned from 13 years of traveling and doing this stuff, and one thing that I've seen not having someone like Nomad Capitalist to help me, is the mental and strategic preparation you need to have before you even start looking at which passport I want to get as my second passport or where I want to incorporate my company. I've seen people, having helped hundreds of folks, I've seen people do themselves a great disservice by rushing into what I call the shiny objects, the Panama companies, the Malaysia residences, the Malta citizenships. So the first step is I want you to mentally prepare yourself. I think the challenge for folks in the West that I see less so with people who are from African or Eastern European or Asian countries, it's more of a Western thing, is there's a certain bubble, with all due respect, it's true, we all have to break out of it, of how the rest of the world works. And there's so many people in the U.S. who are around you saying it's the best country on earth. How many people have you heard who have said, I know the government's listening to our phone calls. I know they're spying on us through our laptops. I know that the taxes are through the roof. I know that the nation is divided. But, it's still the best country on earth. I mean, really? Like, out of 200 countries, there's nowhere where the government just leaves you alone, doesn't take half of what you make, and people aren't at each other's throats? I mean, really? So you have to get out of that first. And so what I tell people is, right now in the last year, we've developed more approaches for remote bank account opening. You can open a bank account, whether it's Switzerland, Liechtenstein, or just somewhere, an emerging world country that's easy and cheap. You can do that from home. But what I would suggest everyone do as a first step is take a trip somewhere. It's possible, even with a U.S. passport, there are places that are open. You can go to Turkey, you can go to Serbia, you can go to Montenegro, you can go to Armenia. There are other places that are opening up. You go there. This does not have to be the be-all, end-all bank account, but you go there to a place where you can go as a tourist and open a bank account. You go, you take your $100, your $1,000, your $5,000, whatever it is. You go and open the bank account. You put the money in the bank account while you're there. And then you go around and you look around the city and you realize how, in this place, it's not as bad as you thought. Now, maybe the culture's a little bit different. I'm not saying you're going to go and live in Armenia. I'm not saying you're going to go and live in Turkey. But I want you to choose a place that's a little bit off the wall. And I want you to go and I want you to see. Istanbul may not be for me, but my goodness, they've got a lot of Hermes stores around here. This place, they got everything you need. They have tasty food. People aren't murdering each other in the streets. I don't know, whatever the stereotypes that people around you have, go and see that they're not true. And then I want you to come home. And I want you to wait a week, a month, a year, whatever it takes. And I want you to go to the ATM every once in a while. Now, if you're an American, you may need to report this account, depending on how much you have. You'll want to learn about FBAR and things like that to make sure you're not illegally hiding your money. That's something that we talk to people about. But I want you to go. Maybe you use the ATM card. Maybe you use, you use the card to buy something. You check your online bank balance, and your money is there because no country has more bank failures than the United States. And so there are some countries, like a Singapore, something like that, or in Austria, where they haven't had a bank failure for decades, if not never. And you'll see your money is still there. And I think that that's one way, being there and seeing it. I've sent people to some pretty exotic places, and they've gone in expecting the worst, and they've said, it's pretty nice. And then the added point of having the bank account there. Now, you could do something else. You could have some other kind of economic tie. Maybe you buy a property there, and a year from now it's still standing. But a bank account seems easier. And you're going to start to mentally condition yourself, because I think that it's very difficult to pull the trigger. I've had couples, for example, where the wife, or maybe the husband, but usually the wife, she'll only go to one country, right? You're not really fully exercising all of the options available to you as a nomad capitalist if you're saying, the only place I'm moving if we go overseas is London. Forget it, I won't go anywhere else. Well, you're not going to get the best deal. So the first step is you have to open up the eyes of yourself and anyone else in the family who is responsible for making the decision to move to do that. And so the second thing I would do is really get clear with yourself and have very honest conversations with yourself on what am I trying to accomplish with this nomad capitalist stuff. I gave you 3 categories at the beginning of the video. One is, I'm cutting my ties with the US, I'm out of here. Certainly I have more people who are single doing this, but I do have married couples where one person wants to expatriate from the US because they run a highly successful business. They want to pay no tax to the US. They don't want all the burden of paperwork and reporting, or maybe they're in crypto, or maybe they're a day trader, and it's just easier to just get out of the US. Is that what you want to do? Would you feel comfortable if you had to get a visa to come back to the US, or you would have come back as a tourist, not a citizen? How would you feel about that? A lot of people, they're not ready for it, and so that's fine. I think, potentially, you want to go and spend some time overseas first. And I'm not suggesting anyone does that, but just ask yourself, how would you feel about that? Okay, you take that off the table. Now, how would you feel about moving overseas? Is that what you're trying to do? What would change? What are your fears around that? These are the kind of questions that I ask people when I'm working with them, because I want to get that human connection. I want to make sure people just don't tell me things that are shiny objects or that they wish they could achieve, but they're not going to execute on. And so from that, I think you'll start to figure out, okay, well, what is it that I need? Because if you're sitting in the United States and you're running a business online, you can set up all the Hong Kong and Belize and Seychelles companies that you want. But your companies are still going to be taxed in the United States. So you might have an asset protection benefit, which is certainly something to think about. But you're not really going to get a tax benefit living your whole life in the US. And so if you're not going to move in some capacity, then tax savings are going to be a lot more difficult. And so, is the goal to save taxes? Am I willing to do what it takes to save taxes? What kind of business am I running, and how distant from the US can I make it? Do I want to get a second passport? And if so, why? Okay, well, I said eventually I'd like to leave the US for good. Well, then I'll need a second passport. Or, you know what? It's just a diversification tool. I want to have a place that has to accept me if things get bad enough. And I think when you ask yourself those questions, you'll start to put yourself in one of those categories. You're either going to totally divorce your country, you're going to leave but keep all of your options open. You might pay a little bit more in tax, you might have a little bit more paperwork, you might have a few more hassles and regulations and restrictions, for sure, but you're going to keep all of your options open. Or you're just going to expand your options by getting a second passport. So, we work on 3 different things here at Nomad Capitalist. One is the financial part. Part of that could be asset protection. I have a bank account in another country. If I'm an American, it's going to be reportable. If I'm living in some country, it may be reportable. But it's at least a place where I can put my money, and it's far away from people that might want to grab it. I can also do that with corporations, trusts, etc. That's financial. There's also financial diversification. I want different currencies, I want different asset classes, I want to own real estate somewhere else, etc. Then there's taxes. Okay? Again, a lot easier if you're moving somewhere else to lower your taxes. Then there's citizenship. Do I want a residence in a country? Do I want a citizenship in a country? Which of those things would satisfy you? Know the difference between residence and citizenship. I've got a video on that. And then there's investments. Am I looking to invest in other places? One of the best things that I did last year was increase my holdings in Cambodia. It was a great performing investment for me, even in a crazy year, because I believe in frontier markets. It's part of my portfolio, right? You're not going to get the kind of frontier market returns or non-correlation that you would, by investing in properties in Nashville, Tennessee, or in Adelaide, Australia. And so, am I looking to make investments? Do I want to buy a home to eventually move overseas? I think you have to figure out, what your timeline is and what your goals are and how bad you think things are. If you're paying $1 million a year in tax and the only way is to leave the country for good to save that $1 million, then you might want to think about that. If you're running a business that's on the ground in the U.S. and you just think, hey, let me give my family some safety, then you're probably staying put, but getting a second passport, getting a residence, buying a home somewhere else. These are the things that I want you to ask yourself before you make the decision. And as you go and watch our other videos, as you go and listen to our podcasts and read our articles on nomadcapitalist.com, we've got thousands of pieces of free content. I want you to keep these questions in mind. I want you to keep those 3 different options in mind. Which camp are you in? Because once you determine that, then you can really figure out where you're going to go from there. What I don't want you to do is read somewhere, Portugal Golden Visa, and not realize if that's going to solve your problem, because maybe you would be willing to live in a European country, in which case you can invest a lot less and you wouldn't have the opportunity cost. Or people say, I want a St. Lucia passport. Why? You did it. Or I want a St. Kitts passport. Why? Someone said it was the platinum standard. I mean, we're all susceptible to marketing, and we're all susceptible to falling for, I need this one thing. But in reality, I think you need to consider timeline, goals, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. These are the questions when I'm working with someone. We'll put together a couple hundred questions, not only about strategy, but some of this stuff to really get down to, on a human level, what you want. You're not going to escape to greener pastures, in my opinion, having done it, until you answer those questions for yourself. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.